Moving on to our very first panel discussion, themed as top industry trends and ways to deliver more cloud agile and resilient services. And we have some of the top leaders joining us for the first panel discussion from Oman, of course, and GCC and India as well. It indeed is a great honor for me to introduce our renowned panelists, starting off with Mr. Vikas Kanungo, a senior consultant, digital development global practice, the World Bank Group. Then we have Ms. Sri Lakshmi, Vice President, Head of Analytics and AI from a leading UAE bank. Then we have our third eminent panelist, Mr. Amjid Ali. He heads the IT at Al Saleh Group of Companies, Oman. Last but not the least, we have our dearest panel moderator, Dr. Lieutenant Colonel Hamad Khalifa Al Nueimi. He heads the Telecommunications Division, Information Technology Center at Abu Dhabi Police General Headquarters. Over to you, dear Dr. Hamad, to moderate the panel.
Thank you, Bridget, for this wonderful introduction. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear audience and the organizer, it's a pleasure to be part of this lovely event where we can share the knowledge and experience and exchange some of the information that we are always looking for physically, but unfortunately, the pandemic and the coronavirus has been very harsh on all of us. And hopefully you guys in India are safe and sound at the moment. Thanks again for this event. And as I said, always to start with, would love to thank the organizer for giving me the chance to be a moderator. I always play a role in keynote speakers, but maybe in the near future, I would be part of the main stage as a speaker. Thank you, Bridget, for welcoming all of us. And as you mentioned, we do have such a great panelist in this panel discussion, which is going to be the top industry trends and ways to deliver more cloud agile and resilient services in either the private sectors or the government sectors. I would like to welcome our panelists today, Mr. Amjid Ali, Mr. Vikas Kanungo, and Mrs. Shri, that I guess we are close to each other since you are in Abu Dhabi. Let's talk about what are the top industries that we are looking at, and would go ahead and ask Mr. Amjid if you can just tell me what are the major driving forces to adopt the cloud services, since Oman and GCC are in the era of adopting cloud services lately in either government sectors and the private sector.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Hamad Khalifa. And thank you to the Oman Cloud team for inviting me to today's session. And regarding the question that you have asked me, that what are the major driving forces, as Dr. Saud has recently mentioned, that Industry 4.0, which is globally, of course, a major driving force, which is leading us to the cloud adoption, be it a government, private sector, semi-government. This is the major driving force. But let us talk about the Oman specifically. If we talk about Oman, so we have witnessed recently that Oman has moved most of the services to digital services. Like digital transformation of Oman was the key aspect which was focused in Vision 2040. We all are aware that Vision 2040 is the Oman's vision to do the digital transformation of the country itself, be it the government sector, public sector, or even with the help of private sector and individuals. And we are really seeing it right now that most of the services are already moved to the cloud. These are digitally transformed and moved to the cloud. And if we see in recently in current pandemic, where most of the private sectors have thought of doing the continuing the business, and business continuity is definitely with all the sectors, it is impossible if they don't move to the cloud. So these are the two major driving forces. One is the industrial revolution, of course, industry 4.0. These type of technologies can never be adopted without cloud, because the businesses on premises cannot do much investment in terms of having the big data type of technologies or AI based technologies, or even for that matter, server platform and the automation platforms. This becomes very difficult. And if we look at Oman's private sector, right now, I can see that the e-commerce is also one of the major driving force, which is helping Oman to move to cloud. And last but not the least, the network infrastructure which Oman has improved recently, like fiber and 5G. These both are the driving forces also which are helping the Oman business, public and private sector to move to cloud. So I believe other than the global trends, which we have talked about, the industry 4.0, and then the current pandemic, which has accelerated, in fact, the cloud adoption. And thirdly, the Oman Vision 2040. So these are the three major aspects where, of course, the network infrastructure speed has also played a vital role.
Very supportive, Mr. Amjad, to move into the cloud services. But I guess Mr. Vikas had some of the notes talking about some of the regulations and initiatives that has to be done by the government. Mr. Vikas, can you tell us more about the strategies and initiatives that are taken by the government and GCC or even around the globe?
Yeah, thank you so much. At the outset, I think I will have to thank Oman. Just to tell you a background, I had been associated as a jury member on your His Majesty e-Governance Award programs from 2009 to 2018. So I have some information about what Oman has been doing. But coming to the topic, most of the panelists before me talked about Industry 4.0. And I think one of the key things in Industry 4.0 is the cyber physical integration, which means that when you're talking about cloud services, you're not just talking about data coming from various computers or mobile devices to the cloud, but also lots of data that comes from the sensors to the cloud. So for government to formulate regulations, they will have to take care of two things simultaneously. Number one, ease of doing business, which means that everybody should be able to use cloud, whether they are businesses, government agencies, or civil society organizations. But at the same time, you would also have to balance it with the national security. So basically, when the cloud policies are being made, number one, you will have to give due importance to security and privacy of the citizens. And second, as you heard, even from the Oman keynote speaker, that there are multiple cloud providers which the governments normally, approve, to whom you can put services. But in the regulations, you'll have to make sure that the interoperability between different cloud service providers and the migration across cloud service providers. Say, for example, I want to move from one cloud service provider to another, I should be able to migrate my data seamlessly. So I think those are the things which at the moment are not very matured in many of the countries. Then, a mechanism for escalating or complaint resolution. If some government agency wants to exit from one cloud and move into another, those service level agreements have to be in place. And most important, I think, finally, is the competition policy and cross-border cooperation. As we all know, whether it is in the case of GCC or globally, the cloud service providers, not all the the servers may be within one country. So in case they are between, spread even for disaster recovery to multiple countries, what kind of cross-border cooperation agreements we need with other countries so that a country's data can be secured. And, as you rightly asked, in terms of global examples, you have in US, you have something called a Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, which is FedRAMP, which certifies cloud service providers. In Germany, you have C5, which is Cloud Computing Compliance Control Catalog. You have in Europe, you have General Data Protection Regulation, which also are now added to the cloud policy. And I think generally there is this ISO 27001 and associated extensions, which provide for the overall standardization around cloud services as well as cybersecurity. So I think these are very briefly the things which any government will have to keep in mind when they are trying to go, as you heard, cloud first or going digital. Unless you have these regulatory and business frameworks along with service level agreements in place, I think in the long run, the risks may be more. So I think that is what one has to take care of.
So speaking the cloud service provider, I assume that whenever the government are putting the regulation and the strategy to host and to have any service providers in cloud technology, it should be very tough and very strict to the best practices that each government are having their regulation strategy.
Yes, you are right. I think the only thing which many governments will need to see is between various private cloud service providers, the interoperability is an issue if you want to move from, say, company X cloud to company Y cloud.
It's like a regular service provider. Whenever you do have a cell phone from one company, then you need to transfer to another company. It should be very transparent, very easy,
Yes.
accessible. This is what.
Yes.
Wonderful, Mr. Beck. Thank you so much for this input. And I think Mrs. Shri can provide us some consideration and the most important keys in having use cases in adopting cloud and the implementation of the cloud. Mrs. Shri, if we can have your input on this.
Thank you so much, everyone, for giving me this opportunity to be here. I really feel very honored and kind of, nervous because I have a lieutenant colonel in front of me to speak, so I need to be very careful.
Take your time, feel free. It's a virtual.
I know, but still, I hold that respect and gratitude to you. Okay, so a very interesting question. Basically, I had analytics and AI in my organization, and I do evaluate multiple use cases when we are either talking about being it on-premise or being it on cloud. So I think for doing any use case, what is very important is to understand the underneath purpose of why are we trying to do this. Then comes the discussion of whether you want to do this on-premise or whether you want to do it on the cloud. So talking about the cloud, when you're looking at a use case, the significant considerations to take is the data, which basically means what is the data that is required to do this use case. Yeah, not dumping the data which is not required onto the cloud, need to be very cognizant. So the architecture of how the data will be handled, transformed, and used in any modeling techniques holds very, very important prominence in deciding a use case. Let's say, for an example, we are trying to do an AI ML model to do a deep dive into the data patterns to understand how are the people's spending behaviors. Let's take retail as an industry. For that, you do not need customers' private data. You don't need to know who is spending. All that you need to know is a behavior, which is common across. We all know we have our own family members, women spend more than men. Okay, so we know this behavior, but is that the data saying? For that, you don't need to know who those individuals are. Such kind of use cases becomes very good contenders when we are starting on with the cloud, because your risk is too low. If this data is gone, what am I losing? So that understanding that risk appetite when doing a cloud implementations is very, very important. Let's say, okay, we have very good security structures, we have regulations, everything's done. Errors are humans. Let's say an error happens and you're losing the data. What are you losing? What is at stake? Is it the credibility, the customer's private data you're losing? Are you losing an anonymous data? Are you just losing some kind of data which is good enough for a fresher to do some hands-on experiments? So that considerations of what is your appetite on risk with regards to data, the data governance framework against those use cases that you're trying to do, and understanding the usability and data, and taking only that part of the data that is required for doing the use case is very important. Today, with this large infrastructures and everything becoming too cheap on the infrastructures, we at times like, okay, take everything. So why do you need to take? So be cognizant of what you are trying to use while you're doing a use case, forgetting about the ease of resources that you get, the vast domains of infrastructures that you get. So don't get smitten by the enormous infrastructure that you have at hand to use, but be very cognizant of the data, the governance framework, the regulatory aspects, and do an ethical practice of AI is what I would say are the key considerations.
So I believe that you are coming from the financial environment background.
Yes.
And what you were saying, talking about numbers and the use cases that you just spoke about, it's about how important the data. It's not how they are transferring the data. So as we said, in the IT field and the environment, the treasure these days is the data, which is transfer the oil instead of the cash. So the data is the power at the moment.
Yes.
Interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll go back to Mr. Amjid. And I guess Shri was talking about the financial industry. What is your input on the cloud services supporting in our life and industry trend? What do you think?
Thank you so much. As I earlier mentioned about Industry 4.0, where you need to have various technologies within your organization, and if you want to take the benefits. What CIOs are saying today, that it's not the 10% improvement that you get in the businesses, it is 10 times improvements that you get in your business. And if we see the digital-based companies whose core is data, they have really done a lot here in this, because of the cloud services especially. Now, if I talk about in a traditional manner, of course, businesses are agile today. You need to move with the speed of the technology, and you need to move with the speed of the businesses that are there out there in your competition, in the red ocean or in a blue ocean. So you need to be competitive. So in order to be competitive, suppose if I need to run an application, I need to introduce a new application to meet the business requirements, and there is speed, there is competition. Of course, I need to put the server in place. I need to buy the hardware. I need to get that hardware in my on-premises data center. Need to see whether the physical space is available, and then the configuration and all these things. So you can see that how long it takes. In the standard scenario, it might take a month or it might take more, but business cannot wait this long. So if we talk about the cloud, so I can simply go and do few clicks, and my server with all the configurations will be ready. This is about how the business is cloud is helping business to be agile. Now, when I talk about the Industry 4.0 technologies, where you can have IIoT or IoT in your industries, in your manufacturing companies, or anywhere. So these are, of course, generating large amount of data. It's not only transactional data that you are capturing today. So in order to accommodate this large amount of data, this big data, whether it is structured data, unstructured data, or semi-structured data. So you cannot store this much data for a long time in your organization because it becomes junk. So you need to have the technology available where you can store this data. And once these all device-driven data or app-driven data is ready, you need to, of course, have the data-driven apps to do the analysis of this data, to take the benefit of business analytics. Let us take an example of the predictive analytics. For example, most of the banks in Oman are already using predictive analytics based on the big data, where the credit card fraud is being detected immediately. Instead of doing the analysis of historical data on real time, you can do that as well. But banks have funds available, banks have maybe the infrastructure available, but think about the private sector, talking about small companies or big companies. They cannot afford to have all these technologies and take the benefit of artificial intelligence, machine learning, or for that metric, robotics or RPA even. So for such companies, or for even all companies, cloud vendors or cloud infrastructure already has these ready-made technologies available, which you can just adopt in few clicks. It's not only about the data, it's about the services that is being provided on the cloud. So either you can integrate your on-premises data with the cloud applications and you can take the benefit. Or again, as rightly mentioned by Dr. Saud about the classification of data, which government sector is doing. So we as a private sector can also do the classification of data. And as rightly said by previous panelists, that you need to do the risk appetite, that which kind of data you can compromise in case even if it is lost. Of course, SASE is being implemented in cloud, so which is definitely a secure mechanism to secure your all data. But what I mean to mention here that these industry 4.0 related technologies, you really don't need to be a data scientist or you don't need to be a robotics expert within the organization to adopt those technologies. These are ready-made technologies available, based on the industry trends, you can adopt those technologies and take the benefit of these technologies.
Great, Mr. Amjid. So I assume that whenever we are looking for a cloud services to get from whatever company, we need to have a customization in whatever features that they are providing, as well as these features and services based on the cloud services or cloud technology supposed to meet government regulations and strategy. Wonderful.
Rightly said.
Thank you so much, Amjid. Moving into Mr. Vikas, one more question about the privacy and security. We need to know more and talk about privacy and security that would impact the citizens and the users and the clients and the customers of the cloud services. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we all talk about security separately and privacy separately, which is, I think, very important because, while the supply side is worried a lot about security, but not so much about the privacy of the citizens. But when you move everything to the cloud, I think one of the ways where one can implement privacy is by implementing something called a consent management framework. Basically, what happens is that on a cloud-based services, I might be giving my consent for using my private data when I'm taking a service. But normally what happens is that even after I have received the service, my data still remains with the cloud service provider and they use for multiple purposes. So I think one thing is where a consent management framework, where in an agile manner, the citizen can give and withdraw their consent. While taking a service, I can give my consent to use my data, but then I can withdraw it that, this now cannot be used for anything else. Similarly, just making a cybersecurity and data protection policy is not enough. Encouraging responsible cybersecurity culture within the society is also very important. So the citizens would have to be made aware of how to use digital systems, how to use digital services on the cloud. So that cybersecurity culture within a country would need to be developed. Similarly, developing a cybersecurity knowledge, for the governments to create registers of their digital assets and then do their audit regularly in terms of cybersecurity maturity, because this is a moving field. Every 6 months a new technology comes in, and now I think with the sensors coming in, we'll need sensor standards. Within 2 years, we'll have 5G and quantum computing, which would totally change the landscape. So some kind of a agile cybersecurity knowledge framework, which makes sure that the capacity of the government agencies is continuously built on these issues. And then I think controlling the risk through standardizations, creating organizations which are responsible for enforcing these standards with a clear-cut implementation frameworks. Because what we have seen is in many countries, I can talk about some of the countries in Asia where there are robust cybersecurity policies, but the corresponding, say, for example, Evidence Act has not been changed. Evidence Act is still based upon paper-based evidence. So I think those kinds of changes to be brought in, not only for the technologies which are available today, but also for 5G, quantum computing, IoT networks which are coming in future. So the countries would have to have a very holistic view of a cybersecurity policy, where the legislations also would need to be amended if everything has to move to the cloud.
Sure. So I assume that the cybersecurity strategy has to take a place sooner or later, just to figure out how much the customers and the client are securing from not even the cloud-based services, but even from the social media as well. And as we mentioned, the pandemic has speed up the transformation and digital transformation in most of the government entities and the private sector. And the number of attacks and the securities has been increased actually a lot. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vegas, in this great input. Moving to Mr. Shri. A question about measuring the effectiveness of the cloud implementation using analytics and AI in terms of the financial environment. If you can give us your thoughts on this.
Sure, certainly. Before I answer that question, if I can take your kind permission to add on to just what Vikas said in his conversation, about the security of data and having a culture of consent. I think it's very, very important to let the customers also understand when they are giving a consent, what is it in for them, right? Okay, it's not only for us on this side that we are trying to save on infrastructures, we are trying to do performance improvements, we are trying to implement mega projects. But yes, at the end of the day, it's rolling down to a customer, whether it is a financial service or a retail service or oil and gas for that matter. So giving some kind of transparency and information and trying to educate your user forum, your end customers, by saying in how this consent would help them and how would it make their interactions with the organizations easy and seamless, would definitely bring in a lot of value to encourage that culture of understanding and usages. So that's one point that I wanted to add on to his consent point.
I already prepared one of the security questions for you, Shri, but since you just jump into this, that's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, coming back to this question of how can we measure the effectiveness of any use cases? See, it's primarily, I always say this, any of the forums that I talk about, the purpose is very important, as I already said. And also we need to understand what is this use case driving to, whether it is driving to bring you a revenue impact by increasing your sales, by increasing your cross-sell opportunities, or is it trying to solve a customer experience problem? Your customers are not able to complete their transactions on time, or they're not able to get on time what they're ordering. For example, let's take e-commerce for an example. Okay, I placed an order on Amazon, I don't get it, and I don't know where it is. Yeah, so such kind of process improvement efficiencies. So is it driving revenue, a customer experience, or is it trying to bring down your cost in the organization, which we all drive towards?
Again, you are always talking about numbers since you are from the financial.
Yeah. So either it is helping the customer, because I'm a lot of a customer advocate on customer experience. So if we do anything, being these organizations, we need to ensure from the other side that we are trying to add certain level of value to the nature, to the humans, to the society that we are living in. So of course, and all this impacts in terms of what is it bringing as a tangible and an intangible benefit to the organization should be measured in some way or the other, which is basically by bringing in a governance framework of doing the financial reviews, by doing your cost optimizations and things like that.
Well done, my dear. I guess we are running a little bit behind, but 1 minute for each panelist to their last thoughts in this topic. Mr. Amjad, going back to you for one last minute. What approach businesses need for their cloud strategy and how it can help?
Thank you, Dr. Hamad. Sorry for the wrong name.
Hamad.
I totally agree with Ms. Sri here and the previous panelist, Mr. Vikas. Of course, the data privacy and data security, these are the most important concerns. That is the reason we can see right now also that only 1/5 of the applications or enterprise applications have moved to cloud, which means that the digital transformation or the business transformation still has to go through the cloud platform. And this is mainly because of the security, because 10 years ago or 14 years ago, since the cloud has grown, the security concerns are still there. But as I mentioned that, of course, cloud services are more concerned about all these aspects. Of course, one is that what we have to put on the cloud, whether we have to put the data external to our premises and then external to our boundaries also. So these are some of the aspects where we need to look at the strategy. As you mentioned that what should be the cloud strategy of the businesses. So one is this, and of course, as we can see that businesses have already invested a lot on having the data center on their premises. So for them, it is very hard to immediately shift all the services to the cloud. So what I mean to mention here that if we talk about the business strategy and even for that matter, the strategy of the public sector also, even the banks also, that let us keep the critical business applications and critical data on premises and use a hybrid cloud strategy where you can have the public cloud and private cloud and mixture of that, and then do the integration in such a way that if you want to have the DR, if you want to have the backups on the cloud, so we can do that as well. Another strategy for the cross-boundary data transfer, where you might have, for example, in our case, we do have the cloud services and we do have on-premises data also, but we have not moved critical data to the cloud, and these cloud services are outside the country. Take for that matter AWS or Azure.
We can say, Mr. Amjad, that you have some lost trust in some cloud services.
I will not say, personal speaking, I did not lose the trust, but I'm saying that why businesses are still resistant to cloud. So these approaches can be adopted. We can have our strategy of hybrid cloud, where if you want to have new services, so instead of having expensive services that you can implement within your organization, you can take those services from cloud. or if you have already some cloud services and you want to avail the services which are available by local cloud providers, which we can see in near future that Oman will have many cloud service providers within the country. There are few, but there will be more. So then you can have the multi-cloud strategy where you can have the integration between the cloud vendors. And of course, all the cloud vendors are already equipped with such facilities like Kubernetes are implemented by them these days. So it is really very easy for them. Now, the last point which I want to mention here is the IT workforce. Of course, we have been talking about cloud infrastructure, cloud architecture, moving to the cloud and cloud technologies, Industry 4.0, whatever technology we talk about. But unfortunately, globally, we have a gap that these IT workforce is not yet equipped to adopt those services or to move to the cloud. So in my opinion, the organization has to put this into strategy as well to develop the skills of their IT workforce as well. Because IT has helped the organizations to do the automation. But now cloud is actually helping IT to automate their services. So the service which I can host in my organization in days, cloud can help me to adopt those services within clicks with the help of automation. And when we talk about disaster recovery, this is also within the clicks you can do the business continuity when in case of any pandemic, any disaster that will happen. So I believe the proper strategy has to be in place, as mentioned by Ms. Sri, that you have to see what are you have to have your the list of your information assets, that which exactly assets you can compromise, or which assets you can put on cloud, which assets you can have on premises. So based on the classification, then you can choose your approach, whether it is hybrid cloud, whether it is multi-cloud, or whether it is no cloud. Maybe
it depends. It depends. It depends. Thank you, Mr. Amjid, for this great information.
Thank you so much.
Last question as well for Mr. Vikas. What is your thoughts, and how can the government of Oman leading the cloud or hybrid cloud positioning in the region?
Yeah, I think the answer to this is also very pertinent to what Amjid was saying, that it's not about whether people have lost trust in the cloud or not, but I think creating an ease of doing business environment is something which the governments can do. And one thing which they could do is they could create very specific service level agreements, metrics kind of frameworks or templates, which help any of the cloud customers to map their business requirements to the cloud service providers' offerings. So if I have a framework by the government or a template, if I'm a government agency, and I clearly know that if these are my business requirements, how do they map to the offerings by the cloud service provider? That would help a lot in accelerating this adoption of cloud. Second, I think, as I have said earlier, also notifying interoperability standards and making sure that they are enforced. Another thing which governments can do, which we're seeing in case of smart cities or smart states happening a lot, is the governments being able to provide an open interoperability testbed environment to various service providers. So these are some kind of sandboxing environments which are made available by these smart cities and smart states, where any cloud service provider or a platform as a service provider or a solution provider can come and test it in a, say, for example, a municipality services environment, or in health services, or in education services. And once is tested and the government users have basically agreed that this maps to their requirement, these kinds of test bed environments can be built by Oman or any other country across the country, so that any of these service providers can use it. And I think finally, as of now, the government policies I can say about India are oriented towards tendering for buying equipment, software, hardware, services. But the procurement policies are yet not being modified to, say, for example, subscribe to a service. Say if I have mapped my cloud requirements to a particular service provider, I still, in a government network, has this requirement to do a global tender, call multiple companies, and then maybe buy a service from them rather than subscribing it on a per use basis or per transaction basis. So I think those risk-based agile cloud procurement environment is something, again, which the governments will have to build, which till it's not there. Governments are to buying big stuff, but not subscribing to a small service, which could be very useful. So I think those things which can put any country ahead.
Indeed, indeed. Prajit, are we ahead of time, or we have 1 minute?
No, unfortunately, Dr. Hamad, we have exceeded our time, which I'm not complaining about, because it's extremely, it's a privilege to hear from your expertise, and Vikas and Sri and Amjid, talking about Oman strategy. And, we spoke about hybrid strategies, adding CX, customer experience, and so much more, regulation, data privacy, etc. Yeah. However, 10 minutes we have exceeded. So I would humbly request you to, let me kindly allow our next keynote presenter.
Thank you. Thank you.
Without me thanking you all, it will be unfulfilled. So thank you very much, Amjid. Thank you very much, Dr.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Sri and Vikas, for your precious time. And I hope to see you in one of our future summits also.
It was a pleasure talking to you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye for now.